Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, some critics of President Felix Tshisekedi are worried that instability in the country from the Ebola crisis and the ongoing militant crisis with M23 rebels might be used as a pretext to extend his time in power. And on Wednesday, many in Kinshasa stay home in protest at the possibility of their leader running for a third term. Also, hate on the doorstep. Hundreds of Malawians in the south of South Africa flee for their lives as groups of xenophobic locals reportedly go door to door with their threats that they should leave or become further targets. And a little over a week now to go before the FIFA World Cup opens in North America, and Senegalese fans are worried that many won't make it very far, as visa applications, including those for Football Federation officials, have been systematically rejected since the end of last year. But first, DR Congo is still racing to get a handle on the Ebola outbreak in its eastern provinces. But on Wednesday, the World Health Organization said that there were some positive signs that testing has been picking up and that authorities feel that they are catching up in their response to the emergency. Ebola's spread is taking place against the backdrop of the country's ongoing conflict with M23 rebels, many of whom operate around provinces at the heart of the outbreak. Now, some critics of President Felix Tshisekedi are worried that the instability may be used as a pretext to extend Tshisekedi's time in power. On Wednesday, many in the capital, Kinshasa, stayed home in protest at the possibility of their leader running for a third term. Emmett Livingston is there, and he tells us more.
Usually, the streets of Kinshasa are choked with traffic and heaving with people. But on Wednesday, much of the city fell eerily silent as people stayed home and many businesses shuttered their windows. This was in response to a call by the political opposition to stage a citywide shutdown. Known as Ville Morte, or Dead City in French, the shutdown was the first large protest of its kind against fears President Felix Tshisekedi will try to extend his stay in power by changing the constitution. On the ground, views regarding the protest appeared mixed.
There is a political maneuver afoot, a very dangerous one aimed at seizing power. You see, the people respected it, to stay home and observe the situation.
If we are in a country that is supposedly democratic, the rules of democracy must be scrutinized closely. Therefore, power cannot be exercised by force, nor can one create trouble by force.
President Tshisekedi's supporters are currently waging a campaign to change the constitution. The president himself has said that he is not opposed to this, and also that he would consider running for office again should the Congolese people demand it. Under the current rules, presidents are only allowed to stay in office for 2 terms, and Tshisekedi is in his 2nd term. Opposition leaders say that changing the constitution is a line in the sand, raising fears of deepening political turbulence in the months to come.
Well, hundreds of Malawians and Mozambicans living in South Africa say that they fled for their lives over the weekend as groups of xenophobic locals reportedly went door to door in Western Cape to personally deliver threats to foreigners. Weeks of protests across South Africa, initially targeting migrants in the country without the right paperwork. However, that has caught up migrants of all stripes. And police say that 2 Mozambicans were recently killed in demonstrations in the town of Mossel Bay. Clarice Fortuné tells us more.
Carrying the few belongings they managed to save, displaced migrants make their way to temporary shelters. Many fled after violence erupted in the coastal town of Mossel Bay, where protests against undocumented foreign nationals escalated into attacks on migrant communities. Dozens of homes were destroyed, forcing families to seek refuge in community centers and mosques.
The people, they just asked away. They didn't ask us that we have a documents of not, just asked away. So like a dogs. So that thing's unfair because actually I'm a human being.
Mozambique says at least 5 of its citizens were killed in what it calls xenophobic attacks, while South African police have so far confirmed the deaths of 2 Mozambican nationals and say investigations are continuing. The unrest comes amid growing anti-migrant sentiment, with some groups demanding undocumented foreigners leave the country by the end of June. Many displaced people now say they would rather return home than remain and live in fear.
In the community, they were like Somalians, Malawians, Zimbabweans, Zambians, Congos. Yeah, so many of them fled. Others, they are still there living, but they are looking inside their houses.
A wave of anti-immigrant demonstration in recent weeks has prompted concern from several African governments, including Nigeria and Malawi. Ghana organized emergency repatriation flights for its citizens and warned that authorities were not doing enough to curb the threat. South Africa's government rejected accusations of xenophobia, arguing that African countries should address instead the instability, poverty, and governance challenges that drive people to leave their homelands.
Well, the UN says that sexual violence is one of the most defining features of Sudan's war. Both sides of the conflict are accused of atrocities that in a war that began in 2023. Recently, Sudanese army has made advances in the east and taken back several towns from the RSF paramilitary. Some of the fighters there were reportedly forced over the border into Ethiopia. Now, our regional correspondent tells us that there are rumblings about defections and division within the RSF. Our Bastien Renouy brings us more.
The Sudanese army was very proud to announce the defection of several RSF commanders in recent months, and one of them even held a press conference in Khartoum during which he criticized the Rapid Support Forces and even talked about the involvement of the UAE in Sudan. I spoke to several specialists of Darfur, and they told me that some of these commanders were paid by the military intelligence to leave the RSF, but that's not the only reason behind their defection.
There are a number of factors that are supposed to be, that we think are contributing to the to tensions within the RSF. Chief among those are long-running tensions in Darfur between the RSF and certain tribes in Darfur, and particularly there are certain tribes that a lot of members and foot soldiers and commanders of the RSF come from originally. And over the last few months, some of those tensions have spilled out into armed clashes.
The RSF are not a unified movement centered around one ideology or single ethnicity. In reality, there are many men from many different ethnic groups, and they are sometimes allied only out of convenience. So there is no ideological shift when they leave the RSF to join the Sudanese military. That's pretty easy to do, and that's why the RSF leadership is trying to find a solution.
They have rolled out a series of emergency measures internally within the RSF to centralize control over decisions like troop deployments and logistics. They're also trying to limit the movement, reportedly, of field commanders and the communications of field commanders. There have been reports that they are clamping down on unauthorized Starlink devices and confiscating those to limit the amount of communication that their commanders are able to have. But those measures often are only thought to be further exacerbating tensions within the RSF.
It's still too early to know what will be the impact of these tensions, but there is a risk of fragmentations of the Rapid Support Forces. And this comes as they opened a new front in the eastern part of the country in the past few months, a front that has been turning into the army's favors during the past few days.
Bastien Renouy there for us. Now, a little over a week to go now before the FIFA World Cup in North America. And as the US State Department announces plans to slash the number of consulates across Africa capable of processing visas for would-be visitors from the continent, there are worries that African fans may face even more roadblocks in trying to attend the tournament. Senegalese citizens are in a particularly tricky situation. The country was placed on the US immigration blacklist in late 2025, and visa applications, including those for Football Federation officials, have been systematically rejected ever since. Our team in Dakar tell us more.
The 12 Gondé are still hoping for a Hail Mary. The well-known Senegalese fan club are unlikely to make the trip to the World Cup after immigration restrictions were imposed on Senegal by the Trump administration. The club's president hopes that a diplomatic solution will be found to secure visas for his teams.
Our authorities are by our side, looking at ways and means to ensure that we can make the trip. But if we cannot afford the policy we want, we will make do with what we have.
While the United States has lifted the deposit requirement between $5,000 and $15,000, obtaining a US visa remains very difficult for Senegalese nationals. So the Football Federation is counting on the country's diaspora to fill the North American stands.
It's true that it's a shame for the 12 Gande, who have been with us for nearly 30 years. This is the first time this has happened, but we will adapt. Senegalese living in the United States are eager for the team to arrive so they can support them, and I think they will rise to the occasion.
Rights organisations such as Horizon Frontières are in disbelief over such restrictions on attending the world's biggest football event.
The celebration has already been spoiled because you can't host a World Cup without supporters. This is unprecedented. Senegal must protest diplomatically. FIFA must be approached. Human rights organisations must be called upon.
Senegal opens its campaign on June 16th in New York against France in what will be the country's fourth World Cup.
Gutting. Well, the mayor of a Spanish town has cancelled a pre-World Cup friendly football match with DRC because of worries about the Ebola outbreak there. Juan Franco of La Linea de la Concepción in southern Spain says that it's just a precautionary measure taken on the recommendation of his region's health service. The Congolese team, though, does seem to have taken it in their stride.
There are
other stadiums. There's the option of playing behind closed doors. There are several possibilities. The only thing I can say is that we're used to adapting. And whatever happens, we'll have no problem adapting to all these situations.
And Nigerian gearheads are taking their passion up a gear in Abuja. Drivers into drifting. That's when you deliberately oversteer going around corners. Want more people to take a seat on their thrilling need for speed. And they've built a special track on which to burn rubber the right way. Our Clem Vella takes a look.
Leaving a trail of smoke in his wake, Jamus Bashar Mohammed, known as J-Bash, trains in a dusty lot in Abuja. He is one of Nigeria's most successful drifters who longs to fuel and develop the passion for motorsports across the continent.
It's a sport. This is like the grassroots of Formula One. This is how Formula One started. With drifting, auto slalom, karting, and all. So it's a sport that is developing in Nigeria, and you can see it's growing rapidly.
Drifting is a driving technique where drivers intentionally oversteer to lose traction while maintaining control through corners. Over the past few years, it has gained a following among young Nigerian motorsport enthusiasts. With other drivers, J-Bash is working to build a dedicated drift and go-kart track in order to train local talent and grow the pool of professional African drivers.
Africa as a whole is a factory of talents. It's just we're not using our talents enough. So that's why I'm supporting the sport, especially here. I think we have a lot of hidden talents, what can make it very far if we give them the right chance and avenue.
However, the sport requires significant investment. Several high-profile motorsports professionals, such as F1 champion Lewis Hamilton, have called for more races and attention to be brought to the African continent.
That's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.
Three countries, 48 teams, 104 matches. One world watching. From Mexico to Canada to the United States. No borders, no limits. This is global. This is history in motion. One mission, one dream to make history. Football goes into orbit. From June 11th to July 19th. Experience it here on Earth on France 24.